Obviously my project's got to escalate. This is just a water pump that needs, and the AC compressor and a bracket. And I figured, why not? So far we have a cam, valve springs, bread box intake, fuel rails. We got injector adapters. These are bigger injectors. Corvette fuel pump. I had to get this bracket here. I'm getting a longer throttle cable to get rid of this. It's kind of hackery, but it works. It's been on here for about 4 or 5 years. Never had an issue. So that's the factory truck cable that had to get scooped back because the motor sits so far forward. That's a F-body cable. It uses the same bolts, so I just got new bolts. I just didn't want to pull this sleeve off of there, so I have an extra intake manifold here, which I was gonna rob, but we'll leave it be. Big boy Holley throttle body and the sensors, and yeah, that seems to be the most of it. This was in the bottom of the box too. We got some gaskets. Okay, just mocking this up. I had this bracket here. I had to notch it out. This F-body cable is a little fat for it, so it kind of looked like that, and I just took the grinder and pushed it open. But this started to bend out a little bit, but it's nice and tight. This is slotted, so that's fine. That should work. Throttle cable. We got a new gasket in there. These sensors went in perfect, except they don't include the screws, so I had to pull them off my spare engine over there, which I don't love. They don't even sell them separate. I couldn't find them on the website, so now I have to go to the junkyard, rob some screws for my spare motor now. We got all these bolts here. Gaskets on the bottom. This thing's ready to flop right on. And then we're going to try and shove that in there. But I think, well, I know I'm going to have to disconnect a few things. The radiator and pull the grill out. There's only a couple bolts, but they've never been out since the truck was new. So that's going to fight me. And should be able to access everything, so that should be fine. So we're going to keep this project going. Did a little test fit on the AC compressor before I did this to see if I had to change the water pump, which the water pump's getting changed, so I'm going to work on pulling the belt, the tensioner, probably the compressor, and get to the rest. Upper hose, I'm going to try and maybe get this grill out, and the radiator, and water pump cover, balancer, etc. Try and shove a new cam in, and see what happens. Okay, this turned into a problem. I had to cut half the bolts here and reach around and get the other ones. Grill came out, 3 bolts on each side. Got my fancy crank puller here. I'm going to yank this thing off of here. Water pump's off. 3 10s here, 3 10s there. Off. Some scrap pile. And then we're going to get this off. With the cover off. Valve covers off. Rockers off. And just the cam. Okay, things are progressing. We have some wood dowels I just shoved in these holes here. Hold the lifters up. They should stay. These are the water pump bolts. You can see. Those are there. So I'm going to try and yank the cam out and then stick a new one in without the lifters and everything falling. So we'll see how that goes. Alright, well the rockers are out. I just zipped them all out with the impact gun. They're all on this pedestal here. Just zipped them all out, both sides. Put the water pump bolts in that cam and just until it came out. When the dowels were in there, I shoved the new cam in there a little bit, and then I put the water pump bolts in there just so you have the nice little grip. Shoved it in there, and I just put the gear like loose on there because you could turn it. And I'm just going to line up the 2 dots and that should be pretty close right there. So what I'm gonna do is move that gear off, put the cam retention plate on there. It's 4 bolts. I have a new one because it takes a gasket here. I'm gonna clean up the surface a little bit first. And then I'm gonna put the gear on the chain, put the gear on, bolt that down. A couple ugga-duggas, a little bit of red Loctite on that. Wouldn't hurt it. I shortened this bolt here because there was just a loose one there. That's for the AC bracket, but this don't have the original AC bracket. But I got this AC bracket now. It's gonna be a separate video. And the ground that was at the head, I just moved down there. It's probably different for you. And I'm gonna try and clean up this surface here. So put the new gasket on, clean up that cover, and throw it all back together. Throw the rockers back on, torque them down. I think they're 22 foot-pounds. And then we're gonna yeet this intake off, throw another intake on, do some computer stuff, try and get the injector data to match, get it to start, and then get it on a dyno. About time this truck starts to rumble. It's been together for years and years and doesn't thump, so now it will. So let's keep going. Okay, I got the front all bolted up after some kind of fiasco I had. I had to pin the crank and do some other stuff, but right now I got to work on changing these valve springs. I have a leak down tester, but if you just have like a compression tester and you have the adapter, you can just add air to the cylinder without pulling the head off. I got this tool here, so this bolts into where the rockers would. Basically tighten it down until the keepers pop out. I got a magnet to find the keepers, and we'll get these suckers installed. Okay, so through the rockers, valve covers, coil packs, plugged everything back in, the fuel lines back in. It's not the intake I'm going to run, but instead of changing the tune right now and the injector data and stuff like that, it should just run. I don't have the rad hooked up yet, or the coolant or anything like that, or the belt. What I did was just set the rad in here, and I just tightened the transmission cooler fittings just so it doesn't leak all the transmission fluid everywhere, because that's expensive, so I could just pull this back out. What I want to do is I'm going to pull the rad back out. I'm going to notch the front bumper here, and then the bumper wiggles a little bit, so I'm going to brace it. I never did that, but it should start. So let's turn the ignition on. Alright, we're going to prime that. Slight more rumble. It's not a huge cam. I'm reading this myself too, so. Okay, so what I did was I got this intake manifold prepped. I put an IAT sensor in there, similar to what you do on the evap system on the old trucking intakes. You drill a hole, and then you take this on the bench grinder, take the ridges off the IAT sensor. These come out of like V6, like Buicks and S10s from the 90s, early 2000s, and then you cover it in RTV and hit it in there just so it's in the air stream. So this is the old map sensor, and then this is from Glenn's Auto Performance. This is like a hold down, and I put an O-ring on this, and I'm going to bolt the throttle body back on, gaskets for it, throw them back on, and then I'm going to smoke machine test this and make sure it's not leaking out of here or any other things, the injector holes, and see how far that gets us. Okay, intake's off, and this is the new one. Gaskets are on. I'm going to try and slide it under the harness, get it in there. I got new bolts and hardware for it here, washers on it. These are the old bolts. You could take this stupid thing off of there and the seal, it doesn't need it on the new ones, but that should be fine. I'm just going to toss them in, leave that alone, and that one's going to go in storage. This one will go in storage, and we're going to test this. Once again, things escalate, and I am delooming and rewiring damn near the entire thing. It was ugly. I had wires branching off like a snake all over, so I'm just getting them to a common point and just dropping them out. This was all gross and terrible, so I'm going to wrap it with some Tessa tape, make it look good. Be a lot less bulky than the stupid wire loom. I really don't like wire loom. I do like this stuff. And we're gonna keep going. Okay, I got this cleaned up. Looks way better than it does. Just got it branched off there. What I'm trying to eliminate is how this just swirls around there and whatnot, and how this just branches off into nowhere without like a rhyme or a reason. So I'm going to try and make like a continuous harness out of that, make it look a little better. It really needs to be entirely rewrapped and rerouted, but yeah. Alright, we got the throttle cable kind of working. We're that much more, but I think that's still 100%. So this bracket is tight. This is in here. I have the cable ran, but before I show you the other side of the cable, I just threw this on here. This I could shorten. I just had an extra piece of hose, and then I went from the back valve cover to this thing, and this is going to go here, and then through the catch can into the manifold. I left this open because this is where I'm going to vacuum test it. So I got a throttle. I got the throttle depressed, and to get this far took a little bit. So I had to take the air hammer and dent the floor down, and that wasn't enough. So then I took the angle grinder here and I cut a little bit of the pedal here. So the only thing now is the rubber is twisting. So now I have to glue that, and I'm going to push down on this and just weld this and then re-seam seal it, because I worked the floor pretty good here, and that should be good. I had to bend to stop here. Hold on, let me... Okay, the throttle cable, the throttle obviously is not in the right location. The cable's not going to be for this application. So what I did was I cut the little nipple off the plastic here because it was touching the pedal. The little plastic piece fits right into the pedal, like the clip it in, and I cut the little ferrule off the end of the cable here, and then put a wire stop on there because there was too much slop in the pedal itself. I just got to crank that down a little bit tighter, and then I took the bolt out of here for the throttle stop, and that wasn't enough, so then I had to bend it back. So right now it looks like we have a full range in pedal here, so there's a little bit more work to do. So I did a little video on smoke testing stuff in the past, so I got a glove over the throttle body because it seems to leak out of there the most. I'm plumbing the smoke into the catch can to see if it makes its way into the intake. I don't know why it's smoking out of there. So let's see what happens. Okay, I found one leak. I just don't know if it's normal for these throttle bodies. It's leaking out of here. Slightly concerning, but not really. So I'm gonna... I don't see anything down anywhere else, so I think we're good. Well, I stopped thinking last night, and I wanted to hear it run after I got the intake all plumbed up and it wasn't leaking fuel. Started it up, dumped the transmission fluid out. I knew better. The first start, I hooked up the rad and the transmission lines. This time, didn't do it. So I made a gigantic mess, used up every shop rag I have, and then I had to go to Walmart, grab some kitty litter and some more transmission fluid. And then it wouldn't want to run again. I think it fouled the plugs. The fueling's way off, so then now I brought my laptop. I'm going to try and flash a file I have into the truck. Okay, so I got my HP Tuner's little dongle plug-in, and I opened it up, and I had the computer is ancient. I was playing with this for like a couple hours last night. I haven't done any tuning in a few years, so I'm a little rusty at this. So I went into my documents. And my files, I had logs and tunes. I had a stewed tune for my Studebaker. Well, basically I wanted to save it because it was a good config file. Because it's a 5.3 with 80E, so somebody segment swapped the transmission in there and its speed density so it doesn't run off a mass airflow sensor. So, and it was basically a good stock tune-up. So I saved that. And then I was playing with it, and then I changed the speed limiter because it was set to 150, and I turned off a couple limiters and stuff like that. So then I was working here. Oh, I should probably open a tune because I don't know why I closed one. I downloaded 2 tunes. This was a stock Avalanche tune, and that's another stock Avalanche tune. Okay, I just renamed that. So I found this tune here. This was for a 07 Avalanche. It was stock, and that was one of the things that used the injectors I'm using. It was a flex fuel injector. It's used in like 2500s for like a year or two, and it's used in a Suburban, but Avalanche seemed common. So that was wrong. Let me open that. Well, it's not wrong. It just reads different. So it goes pressure delta. So when I wanted to change going engine to fuel, I went to flow rate versus pressure. And this is different how it reads. I could change the units to everything, but that still does not. I can't just copy and paste that into, say, this tune. This is the other Avalanche. The other one was 07, this is 06. So this goes versus KPA, and then it goes manifold vacuum. So this is the same injectors used in a Gen 3 application. So what I did was I copied and pasted that data, that one, and that one. Well, the pulse was the same on all of them, and this one here. The only thing I didn't change was this manifold vacuum offset versus volts versus vacuum chart. I don't know if I need that. I'm not sure, but this should make it run. I think I'll leave that up to the tuner. I don't know much about that, so I'll just go back into my documents. Logs and tunes. And I'll go to this one. And we'll go to the flow rate. So you can see these numbers. It goes up to 36-pound injectors. That's what I was getting when I Googled the number on the injectors to swap the data in. This all said 21 and 22 all the way across. So those are little baby injectors. No wonder why it's not running. It's trying to run these big injectors. It's trying to run these big injectors at the same pulse width. I think that's what it's pulse width as the little one, so it's dumping way more fuel in there. So what I'm going to do is, this tune's opened, I'm going to connect to the vehicle, and then I'm going to write it to the vehicle. Okay. We just wrote the tune to the computer. This was to the ECM. This was a massive problem. I had to buy a credit. I thought there was already credits on this thing, so I tried connecting to my mobile hotspot, which then turned out to be, I don't have a mobile hotspot anymore. You have to pay extra for that on my phone. So I upgraded my plan. I had to go back home onto Wi-Fi, buy credits, re-update my phone, and then I just had to close this. I had to buy credits, and then I had to connect to this old ass computer. Will not connect to the hotspot, so then I have to connect it via a cord, which is a massive annoying problem to have. Thankfully I have enough USB ports, and once I had the credits on here, I was able to resync the interface. It showed the credits on there because it wasn't before. Just wrote the tune to the computer. Let's turn this off, back on. And it should be running pretty good now. I thought the belt sucked up the wires for the fan. Apparently it wasn't aligned right, and I lost a rib. $70 belt. That's great. That there. It's been fighting me the whole time. Try and burp the system. Belt seems to be staying on this time. Alright, this looks like shit. Let's fix it. I'm gonna do short clips before I get copyrighted for the music next door at the bar. This is back together. I'm gonna take some zip ties. I'm gonna clean this up real quick, and then I'm gonna close the hood, take it for a drive, and maybe wash some of this oil off the frame. Back in the shop, something moved or got tweaked. I had to stack a bunch of washers underneath this to get the hood to latch. Don't love that. I think I'm going to put a hood pin here. We just weld a bolt through it, so it goes through this, and then through the grill I'll stick like a pin so it doesn't, like a secondary safety, because this one's kind of cheesy. I don't really trust this one anymore. Something moved. I don't know what, but everything went back in the same holes. This was nutted and bolted. I put rib nuts in there, so I don't know if that changed it. This was what held the grill in. There were 6 of these. Yeah, and these must be the original bolts. Only one of them came out. The rest I had to cut. And now it's got riv nuts. So I could just zip the grill out, service what needs to be serviced. I took it home, pressure washed it. So it's smoking a hell of a lot less. It definitely needs a tune. It is not running that good. I don't know what the air fuel ratio is or anything like that. I might play with the tune a little bit, but when you give it throttle, it kind of wants to stumble. But partial throttle cruising is fine. I just don't know if it's rich or lean. It is seeing much more air with the throttle body, and the intake, the injector should be close for just cruising. But we got to look around. I do have an extra fuel pump. This is a brand new Walbro 255. And I think that might go in the tank here. And throw it on the dyno.